The punch that stopped everything I told you. Get out. And then, the fist came flying. It was brutal. It was fast. It was completely unexpected. Donald Trump barely had time to react before the knuckles connected. Hard, with his chest, sending a sharp jolt through his ribs. The force knocked him off balance, his tailored suit jacket flaring open as he staggered backward. Then, impact. His back slammed into the thick glass doors of the dealership with a heavy thud. The force rattled the entire entrance. The glass shook but did not shatter. A heartbeat later, gravity took control. The former president of the United States fell. The billionaire. The real estate mogul. The man who had once held the nuclear codes. He went down hard, his body colliding with the rough, unforgiving asphalt. For a brief, almost surreal moment, the world seemed to pause. Then came the sound. Gasps. 1, 2, then a wave of them. A ripple of shock and disbelief spread through the small crowd gathered outside the dealership. Some recoiled in horror, their eyes darting from Trump's crumpled figure on the pavement to the furious man who had thrown the punch. Others stood frozen, their mouths slightly open, struggling to process what had just happened. And then came the real explosion. The cameras roll. The internet awakens. Oh my God. Did you see that? Someone whispered. Is that Trump? Phones flashed to life as people scrambled to hit the record button. A scandal had just unfolded before their eyes. The kind of moment that breaks the internet. The kind of moment that can't be ignored. A former U.S. president punched and thrown to the ground. At a car dealership of all places. The footage would be on every news channel within the hour. But at this moment, in this small parking lot, reality was still settling in. And the man responsible for the punch? He was just getting started. The rage of an ordinary man standing over Trump, his chest heaving, was a middle-aged man with clenched fists, his knuckles red from the force of the hit. His dealership uniform was slightly wrinkled, his name tag reflecting the neon lights of the showroom behind him. Manager, Kevin Reynolds. And Kevin? He looked like a man who had had enough. Enough of the politics. Enough of the headlines. Enough of the billionaires who thought they could walk all over people like him. His face was twisted in anger. His jaw clenched so tightly it looked painful. His nostrils flared as he pointed an accusatory finger straight down at Trump. I don't give a damn who you are, he bellowed. His voice boomed through the lot, cutting through the low murmur of the onlookers. I don't care how much money you have. I don't care how many buildings have your damn name on them. You, his voice shook with rage, are a problem, and I don't want problems in MY store. His words echoed, bouncing off the cars in the lot, hitting the ears of every single person watching. This wasn't just an altercation anymore. This was personal. Kevin wasn't afraid. He didn't hesitate. He didn't back down. And that made the situation even more dangerous. The moment of judgment, all eyes turned to Trump, still on the ground. People expected a reaction. They expected rage. They expected him to explode, to start shouting, to threaten to sue the dealership into bankruptcy, to summon his legal team like a god summoning lightning. But that's not what happened. Instead, he did something that no one saw coming. The smile that changed everything. Trump sat up. Slowly, he ignored the pain radiating through his back. He ignored the murmurs. He ignored the dozen cameras now pointed at him. His movements were deliberate, controlled, almost theatrical. He lifted a hand, brushing off the non-existent dust from his jacket. He straightened his tie with calm precision. And then, he smiled. It wasn't a grin. It wasn't forced. It was a slow, controlled smile of absolute certainty. It was the kind of smile that made people nervous. And in that instant, the power shifted. The crowd, which had been holding its collective breath, suddenly felt the tension change. Kevin, who just moments ago had been in full control of the moment, suddenly looked like he had just walked into a trap. And then, in a voice so steady it sent a chill down spines, Trump said, "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." The shift in power. Kevin blinked. He had expected anger. He had expected outrage. But this was something else. The crowd felt it too. There was something about the way Trump had said it. So measured, so absolutely certain. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't an insult. It was a promise. The storm that was coming at that moment, everyone watching knew. This wasn't over. Something was coming. Trump wasn't just walking away from this. No, he was planning something. And whatever it was going to be big. Because Donald Trump never lets a slight go unanswered. And this was war. I was there. I saw the whole thing unfold, and I still can't believe it happened the way it did. At first, it was just another ordinary evening. I had stopped by the dealership to check out a new truck I'd been eyeing for weeks. The place was buzzing with people, mostly just browsing, chatting with salesmen, kicking tires like they knew what they were doing. Then, in a matter of minutes, everything changed. I remember the moment Kevin Reynolds punched Donald Trump. It didn't seem real at first. 1 second, Trump was standing there, talking, and the next, bam! Kevin's fist slammed into his chest, sending him flying backward into the glass doors. The entire dealership seemed to shake. The sound of the impact echoed through the parking lot. Then, as if gravity had taken its time catching up, Trump hit the pavement hard. A collective gasp swept through the crowd. People froze, their faces a mix of shock and disbelief. For a split second, it was dead silent. Then, all at once, people scrambled for their phones. The bright glow of screens lit up the night, cameras already rolling. Some people whispered in hushed, excited tones, while others just stood there, slack-jawed, trying to process what they had just seen. Kevin stood over Trump, his chest rising and falling, his fist still clenched. His face was red, veins bulging in his neck, like he had been waiting for this moment for years. "I don't give a damn who you are," he barked, his voice still shaking with rage. "I don't care how much money you have, how many people kiss your ass. You're a problem, and I don't want problems in my store." I remember thinking, oh, this guy just screwed up. Trump didn't move right away. He sat there for a moment, adjusting his cuffs, calm as ever, as if he had simply chosen to sit down instead of being knocked over. Then, slowly, he got up. His suit was still pristine, his red tie still perfectly in place. And then, the smile. That was when I knew Kevin was in trouble. Trump's smile wasn't one of amusement. It wasn't forced. It wasn't the kind of grin you give when you're trying to brush something off. It was controlled, calculated. I saw Kevin hesitate, his fists still up, but his confidence wavered. It was like a lion had just swiped at a bear, only to realize the bear wasn't even fazed. Then Trump did something that flipped everything on its head. He pulled out his phone. I remember seeing Kevin blink in confusion, glancing around like he expected cops to show up any second. Maybe he thought Trump was calling security, or worse, a team of lawyers that would sue him into oblivion. But that wasn't what happened. Trump brought the phone to his ear, his voice as casual as if he were ordering lunch. "Buy it." The crowd fell silent. Kevin's face twisted in confusion. "Excuse me?" he snapped. "What the hell are you talking about?" Trump took a few slow steps, his presence dominating the space. "I want the whole thing," he said. "The dealership, the land, everything. Buy it. Now." I saw Kevin's face go pale. That's when the realization hit him. Trump wasn't calling the cops. Trump wasn't calling his lawyers. Trump was buying the damn dealership right out from under him. Kevin started shaking his head, laughing nervously, like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. "You can't do that," he said, but I could already tell he didn't believe his own words. Trump turned his gaze directly at him, that same chilling smile still there. "I can do whatever I want." People in the crowd started whispering. A few even started cheering. The phones were still recording, and I knew, at that very moment, this was already going viral. Twitter, TikTok, the news, it was all over the world before Kevin could even think of a way to stop it. Kevin tried to regain control. His desperation was showing now. His hands were trembling. I could see him breathing heavier. He knew this was getting way bigger than just a fist fight. And then, he made a terrible mistake. Kevin lunged at Trump. I heard people scream. Some stepped back. One woman actually dropped her phone, covering her mouth. Kevin grabbed at Trump's suit, trying to shove him, trying to regain the power he had lost. But before he could do anything, they appeared. Trump's security team. Two massive men, both in sharp black suits, moved like shadows out of nowhere. They were lightning fast. One of them grabbed Kevin by the collar, yanked him back, and sent him crashing onto the pavement. And just like that, Kevin Reynolds, the man who threw the first punch, the man who had stood over Trump just minutes ago, was now the one on the ground. Trump looked down at him, straightened his tie, and with zero emotion, he simply said, "Bad move." The crowd exploded. Some people cheered. Others just stood there, stunned. Kevin lay on the pavement, his entire career flashing before his eyes. Then Trump turned to the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice steady and strong, "I am officially the new owner of this dealership." Kevin let out a breathless, defeated laugh. I saw the dealership employees inside, watching from behind the glass. Some of them actually looked excited. One young salesman hesitantly stepped forward, looking nervous but curious. "Sir, does that mean we work for you now?" Trump smirked. "That's exactly what it means." And then he looked back at Kevin, the man on the ground, the man who had started it all. Trump didn't yell. He didn't gloat. He just spoke two words. "You're fired." Kevin's face fell. It was over. He had lost everything. Trump turned, walking straight through the dealership doors, like he had owned them forever. The crowd parted for him. Kevin sat there on the pavement, his entire career destroyed in under 10 minutes. And Trump? He never looked back. I stood there, watching Donald Trump disappear through the dealership doors, his steps slow, measured, victorious. The air outside was still charged with tension. The crowd was still buzzing, half of them cheering, half of them just staring in disbelief at what had just happened. Kevin Reynolds, the once fearless dealership manager, was still on the ground. He hadn't moved. His hands were pressed against the cold pavement, his breathing uneven. He looked like a man who had just watched his entire world crumble in front of him. For years, this place had been his. He had run it his way. He had fired people, hired people, controlled everything. And in less than 15 minutes, Trump had taken it all away. Someone in the crowd finally spoke. "Dude, what are you gonna do now?" Kevin didn't answer. He just sat there, his eyes staring blankly ahead. But something was brewing. I could see it. The way his jaw clenched. The way his hands slowly curled into fists. This wasn't over. Not for him. Inside the dealership, the unveiling of the truth eye followed the crowd as they moved toward the dealership entrance, curiosity driving them forward. Something about this moment felt bigger than just a hostile takeover. And I was right. Inside, the employees stood awkwardly behind their desks, uncertain of what to do. They had just witnessed their boss get obliterated in front of their eyes. Now, they were waiting to see what the new boss was going to do. Trump strolled in like he had owned the place for years. He took his time, looking around, running his fingers along one of the polished cars in the showroom. Then, with a casual flick of his wrist, he turned to one of the younger salesmen standing near the counter. "Get me the paperwork," he said. "Everything. I want to see the numbers." The salesman hesitated for only a second before scrambling toward the back office. A few moments later, he returned, his hands shaking slightly as Trump flipped, and then his expression changed. At first, it was subtle, a small twitch of the mouth, a narrowing of the eyes. But then, his whole demeanor shifted. He turned a page, then another. Something wasn't right. I edged closer, trying to catch a glimpse of what he was seeing. And then, suddenly, I understood. This wasn't just a car dealership. This was a money laundering operation. I saw the numbers, the fake invoices, the names of shell companies that didn't exist. Kevin Reynolds wasn't just a manager. He was running something dirty. The moment of realization. Trump let out a low chuckle, shaking his head as he turned another page. Well, he muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. The employees exchanged nervous glances. "So that's what you were doing here, Kevin?" At the mention of his name, Kevin finally moved. I turned just in time to see him storming into the dealership, his face twisted with pure rage. His suit was rumpled, his hands balled into fists, but this wasn't about losing his job anymore. This was about survival. Because now, he knew that Trump had just found out his secret. He pushed past a few people, shoving one of his own employees out of the way, and came face to face with Trump, his chest heaving. "You set me up," Kevin snarled. "You knew." Trump didn't even flinch. "Of course I knew." The room went dead silent. Kevin's face contorted with shock and fury. His lips parted slightly, like he wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come. Trump took a step forward, his voice low, cold, and sharp. "Did you really think I just happened to show up here?" Kevin blinked. I blinked. "Wait, what?" Trump leaned in slightly, lowering his voice just enough for Kevin and the closest people to hear. "I've been watching you for months, Kevin." Kevin staggered back like he had been hit again. "Your books are fake. Your suppliers don't exist. Half your revenue is coming from offshore accounts tied to businesses that don't even have a physical address." Trump clicked his tongue, shaking his head. "Sloppy work, Kevin. Really sloppy." My heart was pounding. I wasn't alone. I saw the looks on the employees' faces. Some of them had no idea what was happening. But some looked guilty. They had known. At least a few of them had been in on it. And Kevin? He was losing it. His breaths were shallow, his hands shaking. His world wasn't just falling apart now. It was collapsing. "You can't prove anything," he spat, though his voice wasn't as strong anymore. Trump chuckled again, and then he pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen once, held it up, and then the sound of Kevin's own voice filled the room. A recording. Kevin talking to someone about moving money, changing invoices, erasing evidence. His own confession. Kevin's eyes widened in horror. I could see the moment he realized he was finished. Trump put his phone away. "You're not just fired, Kevin." He paused, letting the silence settle. "You're going to prison." The final scene. Kevin's fall. At that exact moment, the doors to the dealership burst open. FBI agents flooded in, guns drawn, badges flashing. Kevin's knees buckled. A loud yell erupted from the back. One of the employees tried to run. He didn't make it far. 2 agents tackled him to the ground. Chaos exploded around us. Employees were pulled aside for questioning. The crowd backed up against the walls, watching in shock. Kevin? He was dead silent. I watched as 2 agents grabbed him, turned him around, and click. Handcuffs. His face was blank, empty. He had lost everything. And Trump? He just watched it all unfold, arms crossed, the same damn smirk on his face. As Kevin was led away, Trump turned to one of the stunned employees. "Now," he said, "somebody get me a coffee." And that was it. Kevin Reynolds was gone. And Donald Trump? He was still standing, still winning, like he always did.